fighting for
I'm
just
borrowing.
bigger
Ah,
than the coat.
I think the coat's was shockingly surprised, so actually.
Instead of lying like this, it kind of.
I will be right back. I just have to go. Swag bag.
Oh, all right. Good. This will be fun.
You're doing great. You're doing great. You're doing great. Come here.
That's me dodging televisions, rogue television.
All right, good. Yes, thank you, madam. Hello, my darling. Hi, sweetie. Hello. Hello, everyone.
Hi, all.
Hello. We are about to start officially, but we can start informally.
We sure can.
Yeah. We can do what we want, right?
We can do what we want. The world is our tea bag.
We are a bunch of humble captives.
So, I am Madame Askew, and I'm so happy to be here with all of you, my erstwhile companion.
I want to start over.
Let's just take it informal, like, hello.
I want to do a formal one after.
Oh, all right, we can. You can be formal. With sound effects or noise.
All right. I see. My swag inspired your swag. I get what's happening.
They just were babies together.
And they were rainbows.
And they're rainbows. Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Do you want to be formal now?
Yes.
Or should we let our darling friend have her informal moment?
Do you want to have an informal moment?
Heaven prevent.
Yes.
Well,
let's
I
be
prefer
formal.
formality. All
Yes. Formality.
Formality is very
That is where
important.
we're aligned.
Please start us out with our formal opening, Grand
Yeah,
Arbiter.
you're insisting on that.
Oh yeah, no, I will. Okay. Well, I gotta get to the formal space. It's like you gotta think formal thoughts. Ties. Appropriate underpinnings.
Very nice shoes.
Spats,
Not touching others in any capacity.
gloves.
Extremely good posture.
Yes.
Everybody, space between the ribs, space between the ribs.
Welcome one and all, both those physically here at CONpossible 2025 and those out in the internet world. It is I, your lovely astute, the Grand Arbiter, and of course with me is Madame Askew, my partner in crime, my equal in heart.
Hello, lovely to see all of you. I am not clearly as formal as the Grand Arbiter, which is shocking given that I sound like a villain who is in charge of a very formal organization. But I'm delighted to be here with all of you and my erstwhile partner, the Grand Arbiter, sandwiching, of course.
Hello, everybody. I'm Gail Carriger. Hi. This is very exciting. We have done this before.
We have.
I was a little taken by the fact that it is true. Your vocality is lawful evil. And I never realized that voices could have alignments before. And I'm taken with this concept. But yes, hi, I'm Gail Carriger. I write stuff.
You write a lot of stuff.
I write a lot of stuff, and a great deal of it is stupid.
As an aside, before we dive in, I can no longer hand out candy to children at Halloween because they all think I'm a villain and they run away crying as soon as I open my mouth.
Start handing out books.
You know, that is what I did this year.
We're handing out manifestos.
Oh, no, that's for the coming Halloween.
Oh, yes.
So we are here on my, of course, one of my dockets again is we are doing a Tropetastic Salon. It's our new series of panels that Madame Askew and I have been working on writing. And this time around, we're going to be focusing on the trope of the found family. A incredibly queer trope, personally.
Yes.
One that you are incredibly familiar with.
It
as
is
well.
my favorite trope of all time. So yes.
And Madame Askew also, it's basically if you are looking for a book, that is the trope that you need to get that book read, correct?
It's a very important trope to me. It mirrors my life, so I feel a certain fellow feeling with books that represent that experience. Yeah.
Do you think you represent found family in the found family of found books you have?
Well, look at the family I found.
Yes, we have found many a family.
Yeah, we found some family.
Okay, so I have my very rough outline. We're not going to follow exactly.
Excellent.
But we are going to use it as a sort of jumping off point. This is a salon. Can I be heard pretty
Yes.
clearly?
Yes.
Just making sure.
You can always be heard.
That's true. This is a salon, so the design of a salon is everyone has the opportunity to speak if they so choose. If you wish to have your own moment, have a thing that you have, an opinion or a thought that you have, or a question you want to have answered, you just raise your hand and let us know, and we will call upon you at that time. Please note that participation has rewards.
Yes.
So participating, engaging, being good students will get you prizes. So keep that in mind as we parlance our way through the found family trope. So,
Although, that said, everybody can have one of my bookmarks, or both.
oh, they can.
Right.
This is free.
Yes.
This is free.
These are free.
These are earned. There's a difference.
This has a list of all of my books on the back, like a checklist, so you can, in fact, catch them all. And then this has a list of books by other people that I often recommend, many of which are, in fact, found family. So, there you go, a reading list for you.
So let's start from the base level. We all have a fairly good understanding about what a trope is, but let's establish just very quickly, a trope is a part of media where it's repeated over and over. So it takes place in pieces of media on a regular basis.
It is a set of narrative beats that set up expectations in the viewer or readership because of similar sets of beats that have come before.
It's a historical thing.
It's historical, but it is also culturally impactful. So one culture will not necessarily have the same literary or visual tropes as another one, which is why anime is different from, say, some Western media.
But also what's kind of interesting is some of those tropes will be not just interpreted differently, but also they'll still have the same tropes, the same concepts, but they will have different DNA of what makes
Different
it.
beats, yeah, exactly.
Go ahead.
No, that's it.
Matt,
And that's why sometimes when you find yourself suddenly angry with the end of a piece of media and you're wondering, but why? Why am I so angry? I was having such a good time. And then Agatha died and there's no found family. What happened? I'm sorry, Ty, I had to talk about it a moment.
We're going down that road.
No, we are not going down that road. When you feel angry at the end, it's because sometimes those beats were,
The trope has been violated.
yeah, they've led you down a garden path, but you didn't go where you thought you were because you have a cultural expectation that the trope should lead you there. And I think tropes sometimes get a dirty name in some analysis, but they do not deserve it in my opinion.
It is how, as writers or executors of these tropes, we manipulate our readers' expectations. So there's almost no commercial genre fiction that isn't riddled with tropes because it's how we control your emotions.
Supernatural has all of the tropes.
Supernatural does have all the tropes. They went to the trope store, they raided it, they took it home.
for poison or ill.
Yes.
I would like to comment on it. I have to disagree with your statement on Agatha.
Oh, no, we're not
can't open that door.
No,
It relates to tropes. It directly relates to
No,
tropes.
we're specifically avoiding this because we are very aware of the fact that Agatha breaks those tropes.
and also the other reason is
But it doesn't break that trope.
No, listen, I love you so much.
Okay, we can debate on some other.
Okay, we can, but I'm going to tell you, a dear friend of ours who I was saying hello to on the internet is doing a massive, wonderful panel on this. And I do not want to step into that water because Ty has written an opus on the subject. And so you just have to come to WorldCon.
WorldCon. Okay.
Yes, or TusCon in Tucson. You've got two options to see this panel.
You just want me to travel.
I'm going to say, for the sake of semantics, since I'm the writer on the panel, that tropes are distinct from archetypes when we are dealing in literary criticism. And so archetypes have to do with character, person, people. Tropes have to do with setting, place, thing. So, yes.
That was going to be my question. How is trope different from stereotype?
Sometimes not very, but generally speaking, a trope is something that is set up by the narrative. A stereotype is something that is set up by assholes.
Or by the
Real life versus fiction, I guess. Yeah.
Oh my goodness, we've got some raised hands.
I would also say that a trope tends to govern an action and a stereotype tends to cover an identity a little bit, like not exclusively, but maybe a little bit more broadly.
But remember, tropes are not for people anyway.
Yeah.
They're for situations. So like a trope can be something like a magical boarding school, right? That's also a setting. But I say those words, and if you read fantasy, You now all have a set of expectations about what's going to happen when a magical boarding school is present in a book. Other kinds of tropes can include what we might call scene or baby tropes, which is there's only one bed.
Yes.
Yeah.
Very recognizable trope, but a trope because it's situational.
Thank you. In the back, please.
So I was thinking that if I'm understanding you correctly, what you're describing is a dynamic then, which implies a trope can only exist with outside, beyond one character. There have to be at least two characters, two things
Or more,
involved.
yeah.
Or
Versus a stereotype can just be a singularity thing.
Yeah.
There's no context, but a trope only exists as a context.
I also think it's important that like tropes
And
contain.
it's fictional.
Yes,
Specifically,
fictional.
it must be fictional. That's key.
Yeah.
Tropes do not exist in real life. Sorry, everybody.
Joking aside, about my quip earlier, yes, we're talking fictional. This is a thing that happens. My life did not actually follow the beats of a book.
You can have very negative tropes, like kill the gays, for example, which we really hope doesn't enter into real life.
Yeah, we would like that.
I also think it's important to note that like the context of a trope is explicitly to direct in a specific way. So in often it's not that just the trope is happening, but we're also like it has the beats continue down the path for a considerable period. And while there's different beats for different tropes, they tend to end the same way. And when they don't, we get to the places where Askew was talking about, where it's like we've broken a convention.
The Chosen One or A Sacred Prophecy are both very common, extremely predictable tropes, still quite popular, for example.
Yes.
So you're setting up a predictable payoff.
For the audience, and from a writerly perspective, it means the audience is going to feel satisfied or manipulated or delighted if you subvert the trope in a way that they find appealing, because there is a trope they're quite familiar with that's suddenly turned on its head.
And you can do both positively and negatively. So it's not like really the success of your trope is dependent on the reader.
And what they want.
Yeah, so if they go to this and they're like, well, it seems like it's going this way, but I don't know. It sounds like they're going to turn it around, and then they don't turn the trope on its head, you could also be disappointed. So it's sort of like, what was the interpretation from, it's a very audience-based experience.
A love triangle, for example, is a trope that's quite divisive in the romance community. There are some people that really, really love it, and there are others that really dislike it. There are genres that consistently employ it, like YA, and then there are adult romance, for example, tends to avoid it, unless they turn it into what romance calls a why choose dynamic, which is when they all end up together anyway.
This is going to be the last one for this particular topic.
I think tropes are like junk food, and that you know exactly what you're gonna get when you open that can of Pringles or you open that candy bar, and that's why you want it. And certain people have different tastes for different junk foods.
Yeah.
And that's why if you end up getting food poisoning from it afterwards, you feel betrayed.
But sometimes you open that can of Pringles and it's sriracha Pringles and you weren't expecting it, but you're like, ooh, nice.
Actually,
Last one before we move on to the next portion.
Two things. One, squash. What's everything that exists?
What?
Sriracha Pringles.
That's
I assume.
I have spicy barbecue beef Pringles. I remember at this very moment. So sriracha Pringles must be.
I'm made up, but maybe.
Oh no, I'm
It's
sure.
more
Yes.
just sort of a stigma thing than a direct trope versus stereotype versus however you want to phrase it thing. I kind of feel like just the phrases, trope versus stereotype. Well, yes, they are often both used negatively. I feel like stereotype is used negatively way more often.
Yeah.
Because it is negative.
And because trope is being actively reclaimed, specifically by the romance genre.
Yeah.
Because it used to be quite a dirty word to be accused of being tropey. But now everybody is realizing that no, actually, readers are actively looking for specific tropes and they like it. And now that readers have the ability to vocalize what they're looking for and ownership of when you like your junk food, and you can proudly stand up and say, yes, I do like,
The one bed trope or
one
whatever.
thread, exactly, yeah, or Step Brothers, a personal favorite of mine. We'll vote quickly on.
We're going to move forward because we have a whole specific trope to go over.
Yes.
Not the concept of tropes as concept.
Yes.
But,
It's
so
important to define
what
that.
are the key components to making found family, and what is it that what do you think makes the found family? So the found family, from my current understanding, is a group of people not related by blood who connect through trials and tribulations to become more to the whole. or more than the individuals, and that is like the outcome, and generally often requires a happy ending to be truly successful to a pure execution of the trope.
I would agree. Madam Askew is going to take it from here. As a reader, I would like
Yes.
your opinion on that.
Oh, right, thank you. I love the found family trope. And yes, I think that that's a good sort of synopsis of it. When I'm looking for found family in a book, I'm mostly a reader. I do watch some moving pictures, little modern for me, but you know. I am absolutely looking for this thing where our protagonist comes into the world, probably has a traumatized background, is separated from their family or needs to separate from their family. Maybe as the reader, we're really rooting them on to get away from that toxic situation. And they start to find friends, and by the end of the book they realize they're more than friends. They're my family and they love me for who I am. I'm always looking for the found family to not only be this connection with people who are not biologically related to you, but it needs to be a positive connection. It's good. Otherwise, you're dealing with a cult situation. That's not the trope I'm interested in.
What's interesting about this trope is that it has a fairly wide reach.
Yeah.
Culturally, like that it covers a lot of cultures, have a very similar series of beats, regardless of their like cultural background.
Although I would suggest that progression or cultivation style found families from, say, 4-act structure Asian narratives, for example, are slightly different than Western found families, particularly those that are in the commercial genre fiction, because for Western narratives, it often stems, a bit technical really quickly, in part from quest narratives. So the way I see it, the found family is different from the quest, is the quest narrative tends to be a bunch of different classic archetypes like rogue, sorcerer, wizard, whatever.
It's the difference between sort of, oh, sorry, you finish.
Let me finish.
Sorry.
Who come together because they need to balance their powers and find the object or defeat or save the kingdom or whatever the quest is. Found family tends to be personalities that are slightly different from each other that need to find balance through sort of shared understanding and sympathy. And so you do get certain quintessential characters. You get the transmutation of, say, the rogue character who's like going to be the outsider, going to be kind of prickly, going to be sort of saved by the family unit. Could be the protagonist, could be like the protagonist's snarky eventual bestie, could be an enemy to the protagonist that eventually becomes part of the core group. So you do get, in Western found family narratives in particular, some like classic expectations from readers that you're gonna have different personalities that at first probably don't get along really well, but are eventually going to come together and, like you said, become greater than the sum of their parts as a result of each other's affection.
And then in the Eastern versions that you're describing,
It's an interweave. It's usually interweave because their progression or cultivation tends to be like your weirdly from a collectivist culture, as individuals, you're progressing up. You're like leveling up your power. You're becoming better each cycle of narrative. And so the found family is in part to bolster each other up, and within the context of solo achievement, which is weirdly slightly more goal orientated. For a collect, again, I think it has to do with the collectivist model, right? Like when you're found family and it's a collectivist culture, then the family is responsible for the individual.
Yes.
Like that, the sort of real filial allegiance comes into play by the end of those narratives. Usually.
yes.
So I was thinking of examples. For a Western example for that, first one, Fast and Furious. It's all about that.
It is. That's a good example.
But from,
I would say Eastern Serenity or
Firefly,
is one of our most classic.
Yes. Or even Star Wars.
Well,
I would
I think that
But I was thinking for Eastern idea for that, for me, for a really good example of found family and over time, it would probably be something like the Naruto series.
yeah, I think that she's what you're trying to speak to as a person who does know about Naruto. I'm not sure how much you know about Naruto.
Is it anime?
Yes.
No.
Yeah. So it's more aligned with the cultivation component because Naruto's not taking responsibility for him in that specific kind of way. That he's not taking responsibility of the characters in the same way. It's about up-leveling, it's about connecting, and it's their personal goals that become a collective we all have goals and we're all going to different things, but we're going there together, and that's not the same experience.
No, yeah, not quite, yeah.
This is blowing my mind, because what you're describing essentially is like a romance novel, but the titillation isn't erotic, it's finding your tribe.
It's intimacy.
And so, yes, it's just like, oh, we got this, yeah, it's finding your found family, and being like, and so you're telling, ooh, could he be the one?
Could
we-
they be the
could
one?
we share
Could we
one?
add a new one?
Like-
Yeah, they're all
I
romances.
say all those tropes even of romance map really well.
And I would argue the very best found family narratives use romance beats.
Well, I mean, like Fast and the Furious. I mean, that's a romance, but instead of the titillation of eroticism, it's the bros. Oh my God, the
They're
bros.
gonna save each other again.
Yeah.
And they're gonna drive the car so fast, right next to each other.
Every
Love each other so much. Oh my God.
Sitting in the passenger seat. It's very exciting.
It's so exciting. Now, and look, listen, they keep expanding that family through the movies. I've watched every single one of those
It
movies.
takes forever just watching trailers.
Honestly, but like from a purely commercials perspective, that's one of the great appeals of found family is you can do spin-offs, right? You can have, you can expand, you can add new actors or characters. Ensemble pieces, right, are way flexible and tend to have longer lifespans.
And you can ensure that there's always some broken person, right? You
Yeah.
have to, if you fix all
Like the family thing, Teddy Heal, a new found
Yes.
member, right? A new
So
baby.
This is what one of the things
Oh,
I was
survivor.
talking about, which is one of the weaknesses of found family is you can't keep just breaking the same characters over and over. At a certain point, they have to be saved.
Yeah.
And so if you have saved the character, then at that point, you have to find a
New dumplings.
A
Yes.
new
Lost
dumplings.
dumplings.
So where would something like the Seven Samurai or the Seven?
So
Different.
they're different because they don't have it's an honor-based relationship, and it's a
And it's
peer.
a temporary alliance. Almost all of those ones, somebody goes off into the sunset at the end alone.
Yes.
That
They
is,
all die.
or they all die, yeah.
If
that's
they
the
all die,
antithesis
it
of
cannot be
found
found family. If
Yeah.
the family is dead.
The
family
way they kind of find their family, even though they all.
The technical term is band of brothers for those stuff.
Yeah.
That's
So
why I was wondering,
so,
what
like,
would that be?
the distinction between the two of those is there's a certain level of softness that is required for those to happen. And for a found family, in my experience, my thought process, if it ends in tragedy, or even like that they get separated at the end, that is death. That is, if there's being separated like that at the end, they are no longer, the family unit has fallen apart, so it doesn't function anymore.
Although they could come back together in book 2, and that could be
Yeah.
part of the
Yeah.
quest.
The readers would feel betrayed though.
Yeah.
Whereas
Yeah, I mean, you were talking about
watchers,
stepping away from that.
exactly, watchers and enjoyers of Band of Brothers do not have the same set of expectations as those who come to the table looking for found family. They're looking for the sort of gunslinger, cathartic, shootout style, for lack of a better way of putting it, sword out, if it's that kind.
And it's also
very popular.
Let's genre
fiction.
Yeah, and also it's a big part of it is also it's like largely they're all loners and they all sometimes run the same personality notes rather than having a bunch of wild different variations. Like you don't have like sensitive, soft crying
Or
swordsman.
sunshines.
Yeah, or happy-go-lucky sunshine person.
Yeah.
Um,
One of the hallmarks of found family is that there's often a unifier. There's usually a quite a soft
a
character.
son, you might say.
Sun. Or a sunshine that everybody else kind of gravitates towards and wants to protect.
Or
That
always
could be
around.
or that's cheerful and funny and sweet, but also, and again, if you think about something like Firefly, right? We all know what character I'm talking about, right? And that character is very necessary because you need somebody for everybody else to like focus in on. That character is also a lot of fun to play with because you can subvert that archetype and make them like the deadliest one in the group. It turns out if they're triggered or something.
So, kind of like Deanna Troy or Beverly Crusher was, for next gen.
Yeah. There's like I think the big thing with these tropes is they can't have an existing structure of family. A lot of these have to have they have to have it's sort of like and then they had nobody, and then they had something.
That's what the readers want. The readers want to see their protagonist become absorbed into this group. The journey that the reader is on is for the solo person to be saved by the group, essentially.
Yes.
This might be a little bit of a tricky question, but in these found family narratives, can they be interesting and compelling absent of conflict?
They always have conflict.
Yes.
Yeah, so conflict is kind of necessary
Yes.
to draw them
Although
together.
not betrayal. A lot of people who enjoy the hero's
Yeah,
journey, for example.
internal or external
Yes.
conflict has to
Conflict
have
is also
something.
external. Yeah.
So you can't just have these people came together because they liked each other, they saw each other,
Yes.
and became friends.
They have to have tribes.
Yeah, and it's
It's
either.
They're not the same tribe.
It's either a common enemy, if you have like a caper, for
Yeah.
example, it's often, rescuing something or somebody. But it also, natural disasters work extremely well. If it's the group versus the world is out to get them, very appealing to read.
It's why it's popular in zombie fiction.
Yeah.
I was just gonna mention, when you think about this panel in specific, and thinking about all the things that we've been talking about, it reminded me of Sloan Kennedy with the Protector series and the shoot up with Beretta Security, and it has everything built into one, especially with the queer community.
Well, we're sort of edging in and coming around to that, which is,
Yeah.
this particular trope is incredibly popular with and inside the queer community and with geeks, because for many of us, we found family as part of our life journey because our real families abandoned us or didn't understand us or, et cetera. All the things.
Was a bad vibe.
It was a bad.
And I think in terms of conflict, that's really unique, a conflict of some sort in fiction anyway.
Yeah, you don't really have a story if you don't have conflict.
So I saw a couple of other hands in the back.
Does it still qualify as a found family narrative if, like, you have, say, 6 protagonists and only 2 people in the group find it as a found family,
No, that's a
and therefore closer to like a band of brothers kind of?
Yeah, that's a romance.
You're writing a romance, whether they're living with each other or not. If it's just 2, you're probably following romance beats.
It's a father-son dynamic.
Ah.
But it's the romance of familial relationship.
I mentioned,
The Animorph series. So Animorph is a little bit, I would say Animorph is very long, so it has, and because it has so many different writers that are K.A. Applegate contributes the most, but there's a lot of writers that are involved in the writing of those pieces. I would say that there's moments in books in which they are a found family, but ultimately it's a war novel, so it's not really going to have a happy ending.
We're going to have to mention briefly, there's a distinct difference between fiction that has a strong point of view, as in it's designed to have a beginning, middle, and end, whether that's over the course of one book or multiple books, and fiction that's written serialized, which the Animorphs was, or fiction that's written with a writer's room ongoing, like soap operas, for example. You can't impose any kind of parental narrative on those sorts of shows, because to go as long as, say, EastEnders has had to go, there's gonna be now the beginning, middle, and endness of it all is sort of absent. It's just never gonna be
It
there.
has to be a beat, but there must be an end. And the reality is that at a certain point you hit every beat. So you're hitting so many beats that there's not a specific path you're following. You're just hitting every beat. This is the arc in which they have the found family arc.
You'll have
different
This is the arc where they deal with X, Y, Z.
Yeah.
This is the Brandon Brothers arc.
And there'll be B plots and C plots as well, just to confuse matters.
All right, in the green, in the front row.
I think one of the most common genres that almost always has found family as a trope is space sci-fi, where you have a crew on a spaceship. So you mentioned Firefly, all of the Star Trek shows are like this.
Farscape.
Dark Matter, Farscape, where you have,
Lex.
by necessity, a crew that is forced into proximity, and they already have their roles in terms of technical skill.
It's called the proximity alert,
Yeah.
aka the cohabitation trope.
Close proximity.
And that's a really good shorthand for increasing the tension on a found family, which is why, again, zombie is very common. You have people trapped together and having to fight their way out of a medical facility, whatever it may be.
Yeah.
You can also subvert it I would say the very good and extremely interesting sci-fi piece Cube begins as a perspective found family, and then the entire narrative is the subversion of the found family trope. It's a very interesting piece. I don't know that I personally like it all that much, but I think about that a lot. It was very thought-provoking for me because it was clearly subverting that.
I haven't watched that piece.
Don't.
Okay. It doesn't sound like it's for me.
It's a little different.
Yeah, no, I already have that.
It's interesting.
So we talked a little about the necessary pieces to put together. What makes it so good though? It is popular, it's one of the most popular tropes. Why is it effective? Why is it popular? And why is it popular for beautiful and stunning and absolutely filthy queer people?
Well, I have theories, but no footnotes.
You can just give your content.
Share
your feelings.
As a reader, and I speak as a reader and as a performer, not as a writer, I know so many people who do not have a good connection to family. And of course, I'm a queer person, so that predisposes me to know lots of people who don't have a good connection with their family, or don't feel, or the relationship with their biological family is thorny and not supportive. They have to hide part of themselves. They can't be comfortable. And when you have so much of that in your real world, then readers are looking to books, to film, to TV shows, to find a little bit of release, catharsis, hope, look at something that they don't have but they wish they could have, and so looking for a found family for themselves, at least in fiction. That's why I think it's so popular. It's part of the reason I enjoy it. And as we have had more people feeling like they don't have connection to a biological family, that they are moving around more transient, we don't stay with our families, then there's more desire for that, I think. That's my sort of pop psychology.
I think there's also, we've talked about a little bit about the distinction between a collectivist and individualist culture, but the sort of fan family trope does have a component of it, which is building community in a way that is sort of antithesis to our own cultural zeitgeist in some ways.
Especially in the West, yeah.
Right.
Individualism. Yeah.
So like the strength of individualism in the West makes it so it's less likely for folks to stay with their families and be with their families, even
Particularly men.
men. But people are going to spread out and not be connected, and they have to make their own family. And I think the idea that you can find your own family, and that responsibility and strength is still something that's transitive, is something that might be important here.
Yeah, I feel like despite this sort of endemic, and I personally believe it's extremely damaging, zeitgeist-wide belief that you must be self-sufficient. Actually, what every human being on the planet really wants is to belong. And that means with other humans, unless you are an actual psychopath, in which case it's a whole other thing.
Live your life.
Please don't.
Over there.
Over there.
I think
over there. Way over there. Not like a little dick.
the mainstay component of the human condition is to want to belong to a group of some kind that understands you, and that is a conference of value. And we inflate value with things like what we do or what we say or what rank we occupy in society, but actually we just want to be seen as worthy in the eyes of other people. And so the idea that perhaps you are born into a situation where you are supposed to be valued, like that's the point of parents.
And that's why the trope usually uses characters that have less than ideal values of themselves.
Exactly.
So like,
it's a big
it's a big component of it. Arguably, the major conflict in some instances can be like, oh, there's a bad guy maybe, or there's a bad zombie, but the lack of self-value of the self can be the larger barrier to the ultimate goal of building the found family. Because the found family is not unlike other tropes where the climax represents the peak of the trope. The found family seems like the trope climax is actually in the conclusion.
At the very end. Yeah, it's a denouement more than a climax.
Yeah.
Really. The action can take its own like course of tension. It's also why an incredibly powerful aspect of this narrative is people who have low self-worth or devalue themselves, but also people who have, say, an ability, a power, an emotional stance or ability that they perceive as weak or a poor character trait that the narrative and or the group eventually determines to be an incredibly valuable
Or
trait.
necessary.
Or very necessary ability. So you often see that idea.
I'm cursed with this
That's
dark
correct,
magic.
Exactly, but that turns out to be the thing that saves the day once you're in a group with other people who can, say, balance you out or bleed off the negative energy or whatever it is, however you want to structure that, depending on what style of found family you're in.
I was thinking of Six of Crows, where Jasper has the metallurgy, and he's like, "Oh, I'm a monster." They're like, "We need you to make the keys, go."
Yeah, let's do it.
And it's like, and that's what ends up, binding people together is like, this person's like, "Oh, I'm horrible," and they're like, "Literally, we love you and value you. Please do it."
And not to subvert what I just said, but you can do that with the psychopath
Yes.
character too. So like, he's a monster or they're a monster, but they're my monster. The idea.
I'm going to point him at the
right,
problem.
at the problem, yeah. That's called the outsourced moral compass. And if you have an incredibly grounded morality, you can also, in romance it's called a morality chain as well. Literally, if you have a group that is solidly moral and fixed, they can sink the psychopaths at the bad guys, right? And it's often like incredibly powerful for readers. Readers love this character.
Would you say that would
Lois
also
and Master
work with
Visual does
like
as well.
shifting? So if you have someone who has this monster side of them, say a werewolf, and they lose control on the moon or whatever, would that also count as pointing them towards the problem? If you're like, we know that you're going to turn into a monster.
Well, the group then will safeguard, right? Like you come up with the idea of clavigers, or you come up with an idea of assigning them like, a puppy or so, who like learns how to
manage them,
growl when the onslaught is going to happen, like an epileptic fit or something. Like the narrative will consider this not like a negative trait, but something that the group can collect around and the group can also cohese around in order to help solve the problem for the individual.
And in some ways, these kinds of things are this kind of
Thank you. I love that you brought this up because I've been rewatching The Expanse.
Ah.
And so if you like The Expanse, Amos, like,
He was delivering his whisper.
yeah, Amos, right? He's like probably a sociopath.
Absolutely.
I haven't finished, but I think it's pretty clear. And it's so clear to me as a watcher because he calls his moral compass boss and he says, whatever boss says is what I do. If boss says it, I'm going to do it. And everyone else is pretty moral and he's like, no, that guy.
I just talked about an airlock yet, it's okay.
Yeah, it was the best choice. He needed to be killed. So, but it sort of can be uncomfortable unless it's handled really well. And in those cases, it's kind of
delightful.
It's weirdly delightful. I'm like,
Yeah.
thank you. I always wanted one of those.
I think part of that is because communities require guard dogs. In order to keep there is no community that doesn't need guard dogs. And that means a guard dog internal and external. And that guard dog, the emotional guard dog is, hey buddy, internally, I understand that you want to do violence. We need you to not do that to us. And then the external guard dog is, I wish or need to do or must do violence to protect my pack, and therefore will point myself at the appropriate target.
Yeah.
It's the same thing in Firefly, because you have Jane too.
Yeah, it's like a very a character who's it's interesting because she's no, I'm thinking of the other one. Never mind. I'm thinking of
You're thinking of the
psychic.
the
River.
River.
Because I'm actually thinking River actually fits this trope a little bit stronger in some ways.
River's the ingenue initially,
Yeah.
right? Everybody thinks they have to protect River, and then it isn't until the movie that you're like, no, River is actually the unfixed moral.
Yes.
Psychopath.
I lost my train of thought, so go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just like, yes, that sounds right. I agree with you.
I think that what's interesting about these also is that it's this idea of you have to shape up value systems within the internal compass of your world. So the idea that you establish that these things are good and these things are valuable and these things are appropriate, and then by shaking them up and being actually, it's really important that you have this ability or this personality trait or this experience.
Yes.
And by shaking it up and be like, actually the moral value system is arbitrary and
Yeah.
stupid. And then you're like, do I have to kiss a girl?
You often have found families bucking a external culture that conflicts with the found families value system. So often a found family narrative is a subversion of a parent culture that is perhaps prescriptive in its gender roles or in its, in the case of this series, in its, entertainment system or whatever, and how the family is going to accommodate or subvert or not that thing, or whether they form a collective bubble in order to survive together and stay within the system.
Or they change the system.
Or they change the system itself, yeah.
Yeah.
So what you're saying, if I understand you, is that like in a Western idea, we look at the purpose of the family to produce good individuals. Whereas Eastern is the purpose of a family is to produce good members of society.
Of society,
Yeah, I think that that's part of it, but I think that also there's a certain level. I think the bigger distinction between these two kinds of concepts is where responsibility lies.
Yes.
Yeah.
So like, you're not responsible for your parents, and your parents are technically no longer responsible for you in our current Western approach. But in a more Eastern approach, you're responsible for everything about your family and your connection to them and what that represents. But when we're talking about found family, it's not about what you can or can't produce, or it's that organizational structures naturally fall into organization. Humans are beings that move toward structure, and those structures will have roles and jobs for people to have. But the point of the found family in general is less about you have a job here, but more that you are wanted here. That can take the form of, you have a job here and therefore you are wanted and therefore you can see value in yourself and therefore you can become self-actualized. But it also could be as simple as you don't value yourself, but we value you and we've demonstrated that we continue to have value for you, and through their acts of kindness and compassion, you find yourself self-actualized.
Yeah, the found family narrative is less about what the collective can do than about the threads and networking that the collective can establish to each other. It's a tapestry that you weave rather than any kind of.
It's not utilitarian.
Yeah.
It's not utilitarian.
It's emotional.
It's emotional.
Yeah.
It's emotional.
When you said romance, like that is very similar to what it is. It's intimacy building. And so the satisfaction that the readers get from this ultimately is in seeing the collective built and the intimacy not just established but proved worthy through the eyes of the narrative. So the narrative is then
Officially, Askew is the eyes of the narrative.
Yes, the narrative is responsible for making sure that you don't break faith with the reader base that really wants to see the collective not just unified, but then stay unified and win, for lack of a better way of putting it, because they are together.
They have to be on the farm together, holding hands at the end.
It's the Coke advertisement.
Yes.
From the cults in the 1960s. That's for those of us over 40.
You have something you want to say?
I was going to throw out a question, but before we have a couple of hands up. Yes, in the blue top, or the sort of tealy, slate gray, blue top.
It's you.
Okay.
It's you.
You're top of another color.
Yes, it's bluish.
So I was just because we all want to belong and be seen as truly who we are and accepted truly as we are. And romance, I think, is just finding that in one person, and then found family is just finding that as many people and as a community. That was a very interesting thought as far as seeing romance but in found family.
And another aspect of that is when I'm teaching romance, I always tell one way to think about a romantic arc is to think about each person, if we're doing just two people, having a void, and the other person is the satisfaction. It fills that void. And the key, of course, is that what the character thinks that they want is not necessarily what they actually want. In fact, it rarely is, right? That's part of the joy of the romance, right? And it is similar in a found family narrative. It's just that the void is the groups, the embrace of the group, the emotional support.
And I think that like there's different, because of the way that those can be conflicting, like your belief in what you provide to the group, like a big part of these kinds of things can be, oh, I'm a part of this group, like as we started talking about, I'm a part of this group and I'm wanted in this group because of my ability to do violence. But then that can be then subverted, like the character is incorrect in their understanding of what that group relationship is. They're like, oh, I actually have value beyond my ability to produce labor.
Yeah, and one of the most satisfying things for a reader of this narrative to get is the solo artist, right? The person who is incredibly resistant to becoming one of the group, who wants to go at it alone, who perhaps keeps going at it alone, and then it gets imperiled, consistently in the course of the
narrative is imperiled.
Finally, like coming to a point where they accept that they do not have to be alone anymore. Like I mean, people get chills just from the
Like shipping a friendship.
Yeah.
Trust me,
Which is another reason found family is so satisfying for the queer community, in that it satisfies all different forms of sexual identity as well, right? You have ace readers who really love the found family narrative because there specifically is no sexual component, or there doesn't have to be, right?
And then at least it's not primary.
Exactly.
The sexual component isn't necessarily primary. And like we can see that in books that you can buy online or in person.
Becky Chambers is space opera as well. To a certain extent, things like Legends and Lattes. It's a moniker that we're getting where we get cozy sci-fi and cozy fantasy. That tends to imply that there's going to be a fun family.
You had something in the maroon. You had something to say?
Yes.
Oh, yes. No, I just wanted to confirm, because I know you said you don't have, in a Western context, responsibility over other members of the group, but at least in how I have viewed and consumed found family and compared it to like my family, because I'm lucky enough to have a very good relationship with my family. And we're also we immigrated here, or I was born here, but they immigrated here, is that there's almost a responsibility of all members of the family to create to the cohesion of it.
Yes.
Create that emotional safeguard for other members.
It's like there's a concept of family that is the like hearth or heart of the home unit.
The default.
That everybody is focused on protecting, and it's sort of an amorphous concept, especially in individualistic society.
Yeah, and what I was trying to get at specifically was more the standard culture in the United States doesn't have responsibility, but in found family you have responsibilities. You have responsibilities to the people in the group and to the community that you built. There is no lack of responsibility there. That's why they're popular.
There's actually Adriana Herrera and a couple of other authors in the romance community are doing some really interesting nonfiction work in this very idea of sort of the enclave of first-generation immigrants in the United States in particular, and their concept of family and how it informs, say, family or romance narratives, having grown up in this sort of enclave of a different concept of family within the like American like dominant culture, nuclear concept culture, and it's really interesting, and I urge you to look up her stuff.
And her name is
Adriana Herrera.
And you should just read her romance.
And her romances are also really good.
So
you have one more question?
Oh, I was just, as we are getting towards time, I believe.
Yes,
I believe.
Ish.
I know, we can and do often talk for many hours. But for each of us, as a wrap-up, what's one of your, not your number one primal favorite, we don't do that, but what's a beloved found family book for you?
A book?
Or story, or anime, or story, or movie, or it's just, thing.
But you have to ask her the question I have to answer first.
Okay, so, well, I mean, look, I love this trope so much. I know this author a lot. Sorry, but I do. I love yours, but it's not just the Parasol Protectorate books in which you do it so well, but the San Andreas Shifter books are so good at that. And your last one, Drazzy Dilemma, thank you for that gift, really epitomizes many of the things we're talking about, because poor Trip, who doesn't think he's worthy of a found family,
Or Sato, who doesn't want one.
right? And so I love that. I did.
That is a morality shame book, in case you were looking for that particular trope in action. It's in that book.
Beautiful.
I mean, I was brought up with, one of the beautiful things about YA in particular is it's often sort of found family. So the way you can think about young adult fiction in particular is it's a coming of age narrative. And that coming of age is either how do I break with my family and become, solitary and deadly and dangerous, or, self-actualized, right? Or how do I break with my family, because YA is always about breaking with the original family, and find my people, find my place, find my group. And that is why so many of them take place in educational or school systems, because you are removed from your original family unit and you're now in a space where you have to make friends, right? And so for me, it was Tamar Pierce originally. And while I am a dyed-in-the-wool Alana because I grew up with her, I do feel like the Protector of the Small series with Cal is probably one of the best found family, YA series I've ever written. So that probably.
And you did get me to meet Tamara Pierce, because I didn't get her as a young person. So
Yeah.
thank you for that.
Yeah.
Thank you for the gifts.
I think right now I'm sort of on a kick of a lot of different stuff right now. I do think I'm sort of obsessed with I'm very obsessed with Castlevania, the first series, mostly because it has such a weird found family trope, because it does have a broken convention. It breaks trust with the readers halfway through the series, and then rebuilds the trust afterwards, which was an interesting framework and experience. So I'm a big fan of that. I also just think, as not the most avid consumer at the table, Madam Askew could always take a second one.
I'm going to take a second one, actually, and I'm going to pick something that might startle some of you, which is a K-drama called The Uncanny Counter. It's on Netflix. If you haven't watched it, it's one of the best, most classic examples of found family I've ever read. And I'm going to give you the pitch, which is basically demon hunters hide out running a ramen stall as their cover. And it veers really close to possibly being a hero's journey, where one of them is going to have to save the day with self-sacrifice, and yet they all come in at the end to save the day. It is absolutely classic, like not just found family, but like strong external conflict. And it's a tight, like completed series, basically. So I'm at like 12 or maybe 16 episodes, but well worth a watch. I think it's still on Netflix. And lovely genre piece.
What was it called again?
The Uncanny Counter. The demons that are stronger have a higher count number, because they get stronger every time they kill somebody. And so someone who can count how many kills a demon has had is incredibly valuable. And it's really
Is it
like
a pun also? Because it's a
counter.
counter.
The count the wrong.
Yeah.
I don't think so. I don't think that works in Korea.
That's so good.
Yeah, it's a charming show, and the kid is extremely weak at the beginning, and then is recruited to become one of the team, and grows into his strength, and it's adorable. It's very good.
Any final thoughts or questions?
I wanted to share one of my favorite fantasy series is from Sean McGuire, the Toby Day series.
Oh, yeah. Those are great.
That's a good idea. Would anybody else like to shout out some of their favorite found families?
Yes.
We're putting you on the spot.
Book, movie, TV,
Whatever you want.
has been hotel.
There's a lot of video
Oh,
games
boss.
of
so many
like
video
that where you
games.
have to recruit your companions. The Star Wars Old Republic.
Yes.
Oh my God.
So the KOTOR, you have to recruit all your people,
KOTOR,
and then you have
yeah.
to quest lines with your people.
I love that. I love that we got a different media.
You can also
Baldur's Gate.
choose to make Baldur's Gate. That's a choice you have to make.
Yes, yeah.
As a found family.
Yes.
All right, great.
Qualifies for.
Also, I definitely played KOTOR as a found family.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely found family.
Just for everyone, I just was listening to a lecture called The Carrier Bag Theory of Literary Criticism, as opposed to the hero's journey. It was told that essentially the hero is individual, but the hero is, but the carrier bag is, you are a collection of things. Like, it's more focused on this kind of idea of.
Well, you could read the heroine's journey as well.
Well, yeah. Yeah, so.
It's a lovely book.
So,
I've heard the writer's really
so
nice.
look up carrier bag theory, literary theory.
Yes. I had a question. So you had said that the quest trope is different than a found family trope, but a lot of people who do the quest, is there a lot of overlap?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I think, well, I mean, they're both quite old, but I think from a purely commercial genre in the Western world right now.
I mean, D&D's
D&D,
the biggest
like the
one,
quest narrative is slightly earlier on in our how do I put this, in our evolution. And so that's why I referenced it. I feel like the quest has sort of evolved into the found family as found family has exited primarily the provenance of romance and become something that the rest of the genres are embracing wholeheartedly. I think for us in science fiction and fantasy, it sort of began more as the quest.
Well, and from an author's perspective, would you say that you kind of start when you're planning a book? Do you start with the quest as the plot, and then you try to fit in the found family stuff afterwards? Or
You
do
might
start with found
writing a
family?
quest narrative. I don't tend to write quest. Well, I guess I kind of
Sometimes.
all of my stuff is found family simply because I cannot solve a problem in my universe without a group mind having to solve that problem. So I just write found family. It's just what I write.
You rate problems that require
more
community
than one person.
solutions.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Also, part of it is as a writer, when I'm out of the context of the books that you've written, as a writer, you don't believe that there is any solution that can be found from an individual.
No, exactly.
Which
yeah.
is part of the criticism that you could have for hero journey type stuff is that you have to do it alone.
Or it's why I can be criticized, right? Authors have all of us have very strong voices and point of views, and that includes our own morality chains and moral compasses and things, and that will out whether we like it or not. We can get into a great debate over whether you can separate art from an artist and all that sort of a thing. I don't think you necessarily can, and this is one of those reasons. Is I write found family because I don't have any other way of writing. I don't think I could. I could challenge myself, but it would.
What fun.
It'd be a challenge.
You have something in the back?
At the risk of recency bias, my current favorite found family is on Netflix. It's a Western, American Primeval. It's a very strong. It starts with a woman and a child, and it adds characters. At one point, you think you're going to add another character, but it actually brings them into conflict with it. Another found family is almost their negative side of the.
You can't have that happens in zombie quite a bit.
Yeah, zombie definitely does have the
Anyway, it has a very strong found family, and it's made me think about that. Discussion.
The Mandalorian.
Yeah. The Mandalorian
Yes,
is
yes.
definitely found family. I think particularly as it gets further and adds more characters.
Yes.
It's definitely got more of the hawk and wolf subgenre.
Yeah.
Wolf and Cub.
Yeah, that's what it is. The wolf and cub type genre, which is its own. The thing is that found family has subgenres,
Yes,
right? And so there's going to be ones that are less aligned and more aligned with other ones.
And also, stories don't always, they often have multiple tropes, especially, look, I love romance, and I'm not ashamed of it, but especially in romance, you'll be like, all right, it's one bedroom, grumpy sunshine, found family, and you're like, oh, those are all mine, thanks, take that off, I'll get you reading. Yeah. Like a grocery list.
Although, in defense or whatever of sci-fi fantasy, the same thing, right? You're oh, it has a spaceship or a space station, or there's planetfall, or there's alien contact. Sign me up. Is there culture conflict? Do we not understand the aliens? Will linguistics be involved?
Yes!
Does somebody cross-dress to subvert the patriarchy? I am ready to read whatever that is. Right? We all have our tropes that we're I'm there.
I
I'm
also
ready.
think it's important that we are not using tropes negatively, essentially. And I think that what we're talking about when we're talking about tropes, and we were going to get to this, but we're not going to today apparently. Tropes fail regularly. they don't either, they break a promise from the audience is not accepting, or all sorts of things. You can't, no trope survives contact with the enemy. So, and the enemy being the reader. And so like when you consume these kinds of media, you are interpreting and understanding and either accepting the changes to the trope or not, or accepting the trope as is or not. And that's something that like is true of all media.
Yeah. You put the art, for lack of a better word, out into the world, and then it is open to interpretation. What the author intends, or the creators, or the author room intends, or the storytellers intend, or the artist intends, eventually becomes somewhat of a moot point. And again, we can get into the art versus artist.
And all things require tropes. Tropes are easily identifiable paths that indicate things to the reader. If you don't have any tropes, you arguably don't have a book.
Although I will say, the literary out there, or the indie film, for example, may argue that they exist without a trope, and I'm always like, do you have an amorphous ending where I don't know what's going to happen to those characters? Congratulations, you too have bought into a trope. It's just a different kind of trope for your particular.
Did an artist sit looking out into the long distance with a monologue running through their head that's very navel-gazing but arty and inexplicable?
Did a male English professor of some kind perhaps steal his magnus opus from some other element and then maybe start sleeping around with all of the women?
Did they somehow break the fourth wall of the film and engage with the viewer in a way that was unexpected?
Look, I love that bonus round was the three of us reading indie tropes.
Okay, this is our last one, my darling.
Sorry. I was just going to say, I'm a really big fan of fan fiction, which is also another queer space. Taking things that maybe didn't work and then making them work. So, for example, like Teen Wolf is a show that could be a really good found family, right? But it just doesn't work out very well. They just don't do it good. And so all of the fan fiction is like found family. I'm looking at it, but it's not like good.
It's garbage, but we consume it anyway.
Teen Wolf is higher budget soap opera. And that's why it doesn't follow the tropes more traditionally, because it does have this like, well, we don't really want to end it, so we're just going to keep stapling stuff on.
And the actors keep leaving. It's entirely new writers' rooms every like season and a half or something, and you're like, oh, there's no through line. They abandoned the concept of through line.
All the fan fiction is like, okay, we're gonna make this a really nice found family.
We're gonna clean it up.
Yeah.
I think that it's interesting because there's things where it's like the fandom has like, there's like, I need to fix this, and then there's things where it's like, well, you didn't fix it as a writer, as a fanfic writer. I don't agree with your fixing, and so I'm gonna break it again.
And fix it. I gotta say, it's really interesting, and we can kind of leave with this thought, I guess, which is, in times of strife, the found family narrative is often the thing that we hunt for the most. And it's very, very interesting to me that one of the things that has risen abruptly and precipitously, shall we say, over the last couple of months has been the reading and the writing of fan fiction, once again. And I'm like, when people go for comfort, they go for their original comfort.
Well, and at least pop music's getting crazy good again.
Yeah, and the entertainment is going to be pretty wild for a while.
Yay, comedy! Also, thank you, AO3,
for sponsoring this message.
They spoil us.
If you've spoken and you want to get a little prize, come up here whenever you're ready. And as Askew would like me to say, because I psychically got a message from her, know that your found family can be the people you find at a convention and find yourself. And while tropes aren't real in real life, taking actions to make the kinds of life you want is a kind of revolution.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you all for being here.
Thank you for inviting me.
Oh, I mean, my goodness. We are selfish hussies, and we were like, can we do a panel with Gail? We want to do a panel with Gail. And Gail said, yes, we're doing it. So, thank you, Gail. Yeah. Thank you all for being here. Please go out, pleasure yourselves, and we pleasure you. Get some food, get some hydration, wash your hands.
Find family.
hopefully we'll see you at 10:30 tonight
Yes.
for tea leaf reading.
Yes. Yes, come find.
There's a cocktail hour between now and then.
Yes, we encourage cocktails, in fact. All right, see you in a bit, my darlings. Cheers.
You do.
So I'm not gonna be with you.
I mean, I don't
We
think.
will be apart.
I think.